This podcast series, I feel like I should put a better explanation as to what it is. Throughout the entirety of the story, it became vastly crucial to me that perhaps this story that I'm working on, this book, was done in the mind of the God that made it. Perhaps the story in which happens, the story of Eris, Cyprus, and all these others, perhaps they are major players as different personality types that writhe within this God who sits and ponders this world. This God who has forgotten his name. This forgotten king. This place that exists in his mind. I started to realize something. I started to realize that he was always sitting trying to puzzle this world together in his office. I imagine he's trying to make sense. Something happened. He was born into this world. Something happened to him. He forgot everything. Hence the forgotten being called the name of the book. And for the rest of the story, he's always above. Imagine us living our life here, and if we could pan to God, he's sitting there at a desk, hands in his hair, papers scattered all around him, and he's just trying to make sense of what the fuck happened to him. This podcast series is going to stand as just how I imagine what it feels like to be the forgotten king when he's speaking to himself and when he's answering himself. I've made 3 episodes already, and in this fourth, I kind of changed the name of it, and I think that that's how I want to approach it. This podcast series is part of the story. This is its own story. A story that's fragmented and probably hard to keep up with, but you're listening to a being trying to make sense of the world he had took part in. And though he maybe didn't create it, he can't remember what happened there. All he knows is he was banished from this place. And he tries to unravel it slowly how it all came to be. But every memory that he has is forgotten. In fact, the people that he was the king of, the forgotten people, are part of the reason why he's doing what he's doing. If you remember in the previous episode, and I will say it countless times, a lot more in this episode, the forgotten people stand as the memory. And that's what he's searching out, is the memory of what happened to my life. What did I do to get banished? All along the way, he will have to stumble upon this and slowly realize he himself is fragmented and realize himself that there are beings that rely on him and that need him. And the idea of this podcast series is to really explore what it feels like to be this God. So I want you to kind of think of it in that way as you're listening. This is the creator trying to make sense of the created. And this time he's going to choose a topic of thought, and that topic is going to be the keepers of faith. So let us zoom in more and see just truly what he discovers about the keepers of faith in the world, how they came to be, and subsequently what they mean to him. Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of the Forgotten Podcast series. And this one's going to be a little bit of an interesting one where we're going to explore another group of people that have been very crucial throughout the entirety of the stories. Though in the early days, these people were, I would consider, vastly important to the overall arcing story. Though over the years, in fact, they would become less and less important. At least that's what I thought. It was only recently that I discovered that, no, these people are still incredibly important. The issue is I forgot about them. And I never really gave them a true place to have in the entirety of all of this. I've always been vastly interested in the idea of a group of people that came together to not only under the umbrella of seeking greater knowledge outside of themselves. That's something that's always fascinating. But more than that, was a group of people that banded together for a good cause, and in that good cause, to guide and protect their people, whoever those people may be, and whoever these people were speaking of. As I was a young person, I was always, as I grew up, a very non-violent person. I never really enjoy getting into fight. I've never even been in a fight before, still to this day. I never punched anybody. I never really enjoyed any of that stuff. So it was very interesting for me to think about a group of people that band together to look after people, but not just look after them on a physical level, as in, someone that could accost them in the night, getting robbed. Not like the police force. I liked the idea of spiritual guardians, someone that would look after you, much like a priest, against the demonic forces that could accost you. It's very important that I realized early on that that is something I've always sought. And so we flash forward to about 2012, and when I started the process of creating my own story, that was the basis of the people that I wanted to center the stories around. And those people, of course, are the keepers of faith. But over the years, and I'll get into it a lot more, they did fall away. As I was in the years of making this story, sometimes I would forget that they exist and I would walk away from them, and I'd go off and create lore and create history and all this mythological stuff, and I just would totally forget about the keepers. And I think because of that fact, that is why they've become so enigmatic. They've become so mysterious. And I had to make them mysterious because a lot of years I was working on the actual story and they never came up. And I don't have a reason to say why besides, well, they must have been in hiding. But somehow, luckily, in the early days, I wrote it in such a way where I said, these keepers were long forgotten, destroyed by an ancient king. It ended up working out, actually. But going forward, just their influence will be impossible to deny. So anyway, let's just get let's dive into it within the journals. Let's just see their arc, and I'll kind of cut in every once in a while and kind of flesh things out a little bit more for you. So let's begin. So throughout this process, all the many years of establishing this book, what we need it to be, there's always been this elusive group of people. And we've discussed in the past the forgotten people. I've made mention to you of the Forgotten King. And I've talked to you about how this book is an idea of self-exploration. We had made mention that the forgotten people were memories, long forgotten memories. But there's another group of people that have always been enigmatic in my mind. I could never define them. It was always difficult for me to try and tell you who these people are, because over the years, I couldn't even tell myself who these people were. It wasn't the easiest thing for me to do, as the reason why I couldn't say. But I think the reason behind their difficulty for me has been trying to make something of my own. And these people that I speak of, I've always just called them the keepers, which is short for the keepers of faith. Now, these keepers were, at least in the beginning, in my mind, incredibly crucial. These are the ones that everything will fall on. In fact, I want to build a story around them. So when I try to think about this in terms of forgetting, in terms of the theme of forgotten, the first thing we have here is this. This is a land, the land of the forgotten, of the ancient keepers of faith, land and people that were long lost, wiped out by a long forgotten king in an ancient war. People only known now from legends. these people, these ancient people, were at one with this world, people of the land. And some say perhaps even ancient beings had come and visited these people from another land. In ancient times, people of what was called the Forgotten People lived with the land, and they were very advanced in technology. But these people were protected, and they were protected by this group called the Keepers. And these Keepers could wield powers for the greater good. They were protectors of force of magic, and they protected the peoples of the land. Now, for me, the Keepers could only ever be in that lens. They could only ever be these ancient protectors. Let's kind of keep them inside of that box. Other than that, there was no more mention of them, but they always stayed in the back of my mind. Now, what's really important about these Keepers of Faith is that it's always been lingering through the stories. And the further I went through the journals, the more and more these keepers kind of slipped away. Or they became a little bit more vague. Or I started doubting them. And I started wondering about them more and more. I started saying, like, who are these keepers? Well, I'm busy going off and creating the lore around the Anakume, which we'll get to in time, and the idea of the Forgotten King and mankind. And when I was really trying to establish this world and see what I could make from it, and thinking of nations and thinking of people, the Keepers kind of stayed in this ethereal place. The more the world was being made, the more I thought, well, the Keepers must be from another world, or they must be like angels or some sort of divine beings, maybe even they're gods. I don't know. But I can't keep dwelling on the Keepers. I have to keep moving forward. And so I would just keep working on it. Meanwhile, trying to learn how to be a writer. So I was testing my skills in writing, and I was thinking of the land and on how best to describe it. You know what I mean? Like I was involving myself in the process of writing, but the Keepers always remained this mysterious thing. And so as I was practicing and honing my writing skills, I started to learn about the hero's journey. I started to learn about like Joseph Campbell and all this kind of mythological understanding. And mythology never was a thing in my life before, but around the time 2012, late mid 2012, I started to kind of like establish that, okay, so there's more to storytelling. There's a lot more to writing in general. What is that exactly? And so I took the opportunity to dive into Joseph Campbell and to dive into the process of writing and what storytelling really means. And along that way, you start to learn about things like the Threshold Guardian. You start to learn about things about how to create plot, how to establish your characters going through events, to challenge them. You know what I mean? Just basic stuff. And it kind of, it led me to the place of, what is this major overall plot of this book? What is the plot of this fucking story? Something that I would battle for so many years. It's not even until like me sitting here now, I'm like, I think I know generally what the plot is, but it seems to change day to day. Merely because the plot kind of echoes my life. So at this time, 2012, I was a young man on his own, just kind of being by himself, very fresh and green in the world, and just never really been out in it. So it's easy to understand why I couldn't come up with the plot at that time. I was a fucking kid. I didn't know a damn thing. But I didn't know that then. I was venturing out. So all along the way, this story would kind of mirror my life and my realization of what I'm supposed to do. And that's why to this day I still don't know, because I still don't know what I'm supposed to fucking do. Even though all this exploration, I still don't understand what the hell's going on. So before we begin the next section, I want to kind of lay out where the story was at this point. We have the hero, yet to be named, who has to leave his city because outside of this village, a small village in which he lived, there was rumored to be something hidden in a cave. And he went and explored it. and he was ended up captured by these rebels. His curiosity led him to be captured. And through that, somehow, he would be led on a mission to discover these lost books of knowledge, these lost books of the keepers. Meanwhile, he was also supposed to be looking for some sort of orb. How I was going to make all this work, I had no fucking idea. It took me a long time to realize, like, how the hell am I going to make all this work? But as he leaves the city, he's supposed to go up into the mountains because there's something up there. Now, a lot of the early days, there's a lot of aspects of the book that are still the same. One, the small town of Aval turned into the massive metropolis of Aval. Two, it says he was met by a mysterious man in the market, and this man was an agent of the keepers, and he was going to be tested. So it was kind of like premonition. It was like, this is all meant to happen. It's kind of still the same in some sense. Now, it's this guy that tasked him to go look for these things on behalf of these people. Subsequently, that's when I tried out, like, maybe he stumbled upon their hideout and he found some fucking weird things. And he was going to be aided by this Anaku named Alastra. And he was going to guide him up to these mountains. And then at that point is where, like, we begin this next section I'm about to read, where it comes face to face with this keeper. So let's kind of go there, listen to it, and then we'll come back and we'll see what we can extract from it. But we have something here in which I was working on as what I was said, like, what is the story? What are the things we're going to try to do here? Right? This is just after creating the Anakume. This is something me and Kevin were working on the Anakume. I needed his help. This is when he came aboard. So that was around whenever The Hobbit came out. That's when Kevin joined. I have here something called the Threshold Guardian. And then it's going to lead into the Keepers a bit. And we're going to see just how the Keepers start to define themselves through the story. What makes hero earn passage across? Whether that's literal or a meaning of passing into the unknown. This is the Threshold Guardian. A first test for the hero to find his worthiness. Example, Vader when Luke escapes the Death Star. The Balrog in Moria. So the hero is being tested by this Threshold Guardian, something that's going to stop him from the world he knows, and it's going to help him pass into the world he doesn't know, the unknown world, right? This usually means death of mentor or supernatural aid. The Threshold Guardian of Forgotten will be, and here's my ideas that I had. 1. The Spider Riders, and the hero is being chased across the mountain land. 2. That which dwells in the Spider Ruin. 3. Ancient Ghost, sort of a riddle, hero that must pass by on his own. Anti-hero and hero are purposely separated, the trial for heroes to test his determination for the people of Yuandra. Trials for anti-hero are the testing of faith, for the aid of the hero. For what dwells in the chamber knows the will of each who enters, yet not many have. For the guardian is an ancient keeper, who long perished. His soul remains to answer for the unknown. The quest giver, or agent of the keeper, sent to the mountain for trials, as made prophesied by the keepers of old. At this time, I'm trying to come up with Eris's story. I like the world I'm building here. It's sometime late 2012, mid-December, okay? That I'm starting to, I'm only... I'm about 4 months into the writing of this, right? Man, that's a long time ago, and at that point, I'm trying to come up with Eris's story. So as you can kind of tell, like, he's going to go do something, and it has to do with mountains, and he's up there, and there's going to be some supernatural aid, and I didn't know what I'm doing. I thought maybe he's running from the Spider Clan, which are these strange beings that live on the mountains, and I you know what I mean? It's very vague. There's no, like, and here's what that all means, and here's who they are. Like, no, I'm just kind of pulling the shit out of my ass, literally. I'm just like, I don't know. Then that happens. But there's something interesting here. Something very interesting. The hero has to go into this it says just this ruin. He has to go inside of this place, and it's sort of a riddle. But he can't go with the antihero. Assumedly, he's along with the antihero. I think at this time it was Alastra. Those two were together. Alastra was an Anaku at this time, and they were making their way to these ruins because of some prophecy. The prophecy was so vague, even I still don't know what I was talking about then. Now, this was the moment in which I was establishing the Threshold Guardian. Now, he goes into this place. This chamber is another word it's used. And there's a guardian who is an ancient keeper who long ago perished. But his soul remains to answer for the unknown. So very early on, I realized the keepers were not allowed to leave this world until they finished their destiny. Something I'll bring up a little bit later. But around this time, I said, it's just a vague idea. Okay, the keepers, even if they die, these supernatural aids, they're not allowed to physically, or maybe no, they're not allowed to spiritually leave until they completed what is considered their destiny. Now, this guardian, this ancient keeper who died, is going to be the quest giver. And he will send the hero on a trial that was prophesied by the keepers of old. Now, the hero's journey will be that of reunifying the world and bring peace back to it. The keeper protected all the lands, and the banishment have now seen the world in turmoil. So apparently the keepers were banished at some point. And since their banishing, there was a lot of destruction that happened. And I thought, well, that's the Forgotten King's doing. He came in here. The keepers lived alongside the forgotten people. They were born into this land. We've talked about that in the previous video. But now these keepers somehow were banished, or something bad happened to them. And this is the power of the Empire and the technology that ruined the innocence of Yandra. What remaining keepers would try to restore all that has once been, for their race is long forgotten and extinct. Though they're immortal, semi-immortal, I should say, they kept the world safe and acted as a natural watcher over the innocent. The Forgotten King, being that of an immortal himself, only had power and vengeance on his mind. He believed in the keepers and had all the powers of the world and were hiding behind lies. So he believed these keepers were hiding something from him. He was very jealous of them. So he ended up vanquishing them, and he created what I said here is the Empire. Now, let's keep that in mind, because as I think of the Empire now, I think of the Empire of the Mind. Now, years later, who knows if they're still alive, but the people only know of the monarch, and there's a whole thing. We'll get into that once we talk about the Forgotten King. But I wanted to bring that up to show you that the keepers seemingly were wiped out for one reason or another. And inside of that being wiped out, they have to establish a prophecy now. So we kill the keepers, right? Or some of them go into exile, but they all know they have a purpose. It's just not really sure of what that purpose is. I don't think even the keepers know. Like, I am destined to do this thing. Like, they don't know what it is until they are dissolved. And then, as it said before, they kind of dissolve into the universe. They become part of the universe. That's their freedom. They become part of the bigger thing here. But the problems that I had at this point, December-ish, was just like, okay, how the hell can I make all this work? I got these cool keeper idea, and I got the story, and it's all great. But then I kept finding myself issues here. This is the biggest problem now, is finding how a young man from a small village is summoned to this quest to save the world from tyranny. His quest will be finding ancient books in ancient library to discover the truth, while there is a keeper who still dwells there. So I think this is kind of like me trying to establish, like, oh man, like, he's got to learn of this stuff, but how can a kid learn about these events? Well, he must find an ancient library, and it has ancient knowledge in it or something, because that's where knowledge is always at, the library. And inside of that is a keeper dweller. That's something that I kind of created, the idea that the keeper did not fade away fully. I just said, well, he's a keeper dweller. He's dwelling still. And this keeper is going to give him information about how he can save the world. And he tells the hero of meeting helpers, which they have a natural bond because of past lives and the secret powers together. So he's saying, like, along the way, you're going to meet people that you've bonded with in past lives, and together you'll keep redoing this until something comes to fruition. And it's interesting because it's still a part of the lore now, that idea that Eris, alongside his compatriots, are all trying to save the Forgotten King or free him, because that's all they truly know. And these beings have known each other for hundreds and hundreds of years. Like, this cycle has kept happening over and over and over again. Like perhaps Eris was once Quinn from that mention that I said about the 1300s in Dubois. Like, maybe that was a past life of Eris's. It says the keepers are protectors of faith. They are warriors of knowledge, and they are saviors of justice. I kind of always believed that the keepers were, like I said, the Jedi. They were the monks. They're not warriors. They're warriors of knowledge, but they're not going around with swords and shit killing people. There's something special about them. I wanted to take the idea of the Jedi having these laser swords and being kind of warrior monks, I guess. But they kill if they need to. They're not really meant to, but they can if they need to, kind of shit. Well, I said, why don't I walk my keepers away from that totally? These are non-combative people. They're not even necessarily trained in the arts of combat, nor are they used as that. I don't know why I felt the need to do that. It might have just been as simple as, like, I just want to make them a little different than Jedi. I don't want them walking around. They have a special light sword, But the interesting thing about them, that as I'm looking here now, is it says they look different than any race that dwell on present-day Yuandra. So at this point, it was mankind and Anaku. I really think. I don't know. Early Anaku were not what we talk about Anaku as now. Early Anaku were more Native American than elf. Do you know what I mean? So I think at this time, I just said there's these Native American type people, these natives, these human natives that live on Yuandra. And I left it there. And I said, but there's also these forgotten people that once did live here. And these are the people that we made mention in the previous video. What happened to them? No clue. They're gone. They left behind remnants of their culture. Yet I did have Eris, Nahum, Cypherus, and all that. But I never really said, and then mankind. I didn't distinguish them from being anything different. I just said, and then there's these guys. Looking back, clearly there's Man and May. May being a Naku May. But it says that these keepers are different. They aren't either of those. And that's the kind of thing that fucking stuck in my head. That later on I would just wonder at, well, how the forgotten people can't be humans, because it says the keepers protected them. But then I made mention of, like, maybe the keepers weren't part of the forgotten people. Maybe they were a separate being. But if I say here that they don't look like anything that dwells on present-day Yuandra, like, that means the forgotten people are gone. So maybe the keepers are forgotten people. You see them, like, how it's like, I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily know what that is. I'm not sure. And that's where that kind of begins, this idea of, like, man, there's something going on here. Because this is a very ceremonial bunch who practice ways of discipline. Outsiders to some, but welcome by all. That is, except for the Forgotten King. Of course, he wasn't known as that then. Elders of the forest are very old and knew the keepers. They know none. They know one. Were once people under... Okay, interesting. It says that the elders of the forest were old, and they knew the keepers, and they were people under the keepers. Tree people are their own species, People of the land. Nature and wildlife is who they are. They sense life dwelling in the forest, darkness, and can commune with nature, not on a vocal level, but an inward ability. Interesting, because see right there, it just says that these Anaku lived under these keepers. Now, did that mean under as in like, was I trying to say like, oh, they lived under them, what's the word? Like hierarchy and shit, like they were under their command, or is that a physical living under? Were these keepers living in the sky while the Anaku lived in the ground, amongst the trees and the forests? Damn, who knows? But the keepers only ever mentioned throughout the journals so far as saying, well, the keepers that dwells in the mountain. He dwells in this ruin, the same ruin that Eris has to go into and learn about the prophecy. Funny enough, that prophecy, Eris in the mountains, and the keeper inside of it is still happening now. In the actual book 2 that I'm writing, 12 years later. I mean, as is happening right now, we've just kind of run into some roadblocks because we've introduced so many new elements from this point of the original concept of the story. Those new elements are tied into the idea of the beings created by Oapake. The splitting of Oapake, of his mind, merely the same way that it was done by Dove, right? So there's a lot of new elements that have been kind of formulated around this, and it just kind of complicated the story a bit. You know, the idea of Eris coming face to face with this keeper in the mountains, I don't necessarily know how that goes about, because there's too many new things that kind of introduce themselves as responses to questions. As I face the story going forward, as I'm writing book 2, many years after the creation of the lore of this, there's a lot of times that I came up to roadblocks, and I needed to create some kind of being, or I needed to create an organization of people, or just a landmass, or whatever it happens to be. I just need to I got to fix this problem. But then I'm always met with more complications. But sometimes adding in new elements adds in a bunch of new doors that now you can explore. And though Eris goes up to this mountain and he comes face to face with this keeper dweller, it's not the same as it was described before. It's hidden behind a litany of narrative things, ambiguity, and the great unknown. A lot more of this story takes place inside of his mind than it did before. Before, it was a physical exploration. I merely was the one using him to explore my mind. Well, this is at the point we are now, is I'm using Eris to explore his mind. Do you know what I'm saying? As the writer, I go into my mind and create a world. Inside that world, I have a character that becomes my conduit. Then I make that character explore his mind inside of that world as well. And inside of that is another fascinating world for him to uncover. Now, the keepers, in tying them into this situation here, I wonder at actually, now that I think about it. I wonder if the keepers are actually, so they're guardians of the forgotten people. Well, they're guardians of the memories. So what protects our memories? Those very walls that we have to kick down. Right? If we want to get over a situation, we put all these walls up, right? Or, we try to ignore it or protect ourselves by trying to forget it. Maybe the keepers are connected to the actual process of forgetting. If the forgotten people are the memories that were once lost, then what makes us lose those memories? Well, the keepers are protecting. The keepers protect us from ourselves. So there could be some sort of process in which the keepers represent repressed memories. And we could really see how possibly they may be considered bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe we could find a way to say, well, the keepers may be. They can go bad, I'll say. And also, how they cannot truly fully fade because they're still doing their job. It's only when you come face to face with a keeper, see what he's guarding, in a sense, what he's guarding, like his destiny, if you will. Help him complete that, break the barrier, and then help him move on. So in some sense, the keepers are barrier breakers. Well, not barrier breakers. They are the barriers to our memories, and we have to actually break them. Something very interesting to think about actually going forward when it comes to how we grasp the keepers. But maybe we should kind of get back to the idea of the original concept of Eris coming face to face with the memory. But as you can see, it's changed quite a bit. You know, it's not the same as it was before. I am still establishing the idea, and it's happening. It's just a little different. It's a lot more complex than that now. But I guess it blows my mind thinking, well, I'm still on this path. I'm still doing it. Because you forget about this shit, and then you don't think that you're following your old lore, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, bada boom, bada bing, there you fucking are. You're still doing the same fucking thing. But the keepers, in my mind, hold knowledge, because it says they're warriors of knowledge, which means they fight for this knowledge, and they don't let it slip away from them. They protect the knowledge. They keep the faith, but they protect the knowledge. Okay, so thinking of protecting knowledge in the same way that we were saying before, well, if we're protecting knowledge and we're these barriers, how can that be in conjunction? What kind of knowledge are we protecting here? Is that merely the knowledge of transcendence? Because it seems to be these keepers of faith hold the idea of transcendence, of a spiritual transcendence or a consciousness transcendence, because, you know, they're keepers. They help you lift up. So not only are they guardians, but they're protectors, but they're also the threshold. So perhaps there's something more to this knowledge. There's something more to how we could define the knowledge. What does that truly mean to say that the keepers of faith hold the knowledge, and this knowledge are hidden within books that Eris has to find? But I think perhaps we should just kind of get back to, you know, let's set all that aside and let's just get back to the point in which we're trying to slowly unravel what all this means. So I'm going to kind of talk again about maybe the keeper library and the knowledge hidden inside of there and what he kind of discovers with it. So I had the idea the keepers must have built some sort of ancient library, and I never really placed it in a hard area. At one point it was in the Tyclotahue Forest, which is in the north of the Wildlands, or now modern-day Albadan. Other times I said it was in the mountains. It's never really been defined 100%. It was an ethereal concept. But to myself, I believe that they would have these books. And inside of that, Eris would read these books. And reading these books, they would contain the knowledge that Eris is meant to seek. Remember how I was like, well, he must go in a library, he must have to read it. Then he's meant by a keeper dweller, which is somehow separate from the one in the mountains. This maybe that happened first. Well, to save a long story to get here, we need to establish that Eris has to discover all this. And here's a couple fragments that I wrote. I'm like, okay, we'll put these in. So when Eris in the book reads another book, here's some things that it might say. For those who see me as home, always will I see you as keeper. For those who see me as home, always will I see you as a keeper. What the fuck does that mean? I don't know. The next one says, forget what you know, for it will not make sense. What is unknown will be known in this dimension and yours. The next one says, Mars was a planet that forgot as well. The destruction was caused by greed. The keepers tried to stop this greed, yet Mars Yuandra, and countless more have fallen to this evil. It seems Earth will as well. It's this ancient species that destroyed every planet it inhabits in a matter of millennia and simply move to the next. Do not worry, for it is the darkness that we call home. Through the darkness is the light we seek. These words are what beings want hidden away from us. Too dangerous are they. Can cause unforeseen visions. But what's interesting about these Keeper books and all that weird shit that I was reading was, I found this too. It says, Keeper books are books of knowledge. They are serious learning tools, meant for the expansion of the feeble-minded. We can learn much if we only allow the knowledge to pass through us. And we can create the knowing of the universe. And we can begin to understand that we are all keepers, protectors of our world. We need to care for her and guide her towards a greater potential. Through my body and mind, see the effect of a soulless kind. Look to the sky and feel her full potential. See the light of loving sun and feel the wind of her every sigh. Smell the freshness casting a beautiful energy of a pine. Taste the flowing waters of her sweet, trickling goodness. If the keepers are indeed guardians of these memories, and we're saying that the knowledge of what they've written, so their written history, their written knowledge, is meant to expand the mind, then perhaps Eris, reading these stories, expanding his mind, would become, I guess he would grow to realize, as it states here, the knowing of the universe. Now, is that universe the same universe that I can understand that exists beyond the circle, beyond Yuandra? Or is this the universe of the mind? It says, through my body and mind, see the effect of a soulless kind. So there's some sort of entity, some darker entity in which they're trying to present you with, a soulless kind. Something that does not carry the same essence that we would know as beings. I don't know if it necessarily is saying, like, and that thing is evil and you got to cast it out. It just sounds like becoming, because after that it's talking about accepting the world and what it is through her side, through her gazing point. Some sort of feminine path inside of ourselves where we can truly begin to unravel the truth that there is some dark suppression within us. And I know that sounds like, well, that could be easily said to suppressing of the feminine, right? As our cultures come to this head where we truly have suppressed this feminine side, not just of women in general, but like of even the feminine sides of a man, right? Because we say women feel, and they cloud their judgment with that. You should think. Oh, that fucking stupid shit. And it's like thinking isn't exactly the best thing either, because you think yourself into fucking mind thoughts and concepts, and all of a sudden you're stuck in that fucking room thinking that you're free. So it sounds like we're talking about the keepers guarding these people. I can't say if they're guarding the forgotten people or they're protecting the forgotten people from these things that we're speaking of. Or, as it was stated before, them being teachers, perhaps they are the ones allowing them to find this. Because what was the thing, when we talked about the forgotten people, what was the thing that it said that they had? It was love. And I know that you can't necessarily put human emotions and characteristics of gender together, right? But some aspect of me thinking in this term wants to say that man is fear and woman is love. I don't think that's correct necessarily, but that's kind of where we're moving at right now. I mean, it could be. I only say that because I know there's people that are going to be like bitching about it, because God forbid that there's something that they don't want to be, right? But the keepers are acting as, like, I don't even want to say they're a buffer though, because it's not like they're slowing the process. They're trying to connect something. And knowing the story as I do, why do they seek to aid Eris? He's got to form a connection back with himself. And that connection is to reestablish himself with the Forgotten King. Eventually that will come to fruition when it comes to the story. I'm kind of moving far ahead, but I want to make this point. Eris is a fragmented part of the Forgotten King, so as he's trying to come to terms with that, he's got to come to terms with this feminine side. That feminine side is something the Forgotten King, Oupake, had cast out. Because of the betrayal of his wife, he cast this feminine part of himself away, as she was cast away from him, merely by the guise of the very masculine side of him, his brother Aik Beothak, the fragmented part of his own mind. So the keepers are in some sense the ones that keep the order here. Not only are they protecting the memory from, I would say, injuring your mind, because you remember that you had a trauma happen to you and it can be devastating, but they allow, I guess I could say, they guide you through it once discovered. So they're guarding the door, but they're not going to say, well, you can't go in. Because once you say, I want to go in, they're like, well, okay, you have to. And they try to aid you in that. And that connects back to the destiny that they may have. I mean, as of right now, I'm guessing at this stuff, but it's definitely, it's complex. It is very, very complex. But at the time, what was I trying to say inside of the book? Because we're starting to talk about planets. We're talking about Mars and stuff. Like, the lowly point of it. Like, what was I trying to say at that point? I think what I was trying to do, I was establishing the idea that maybe Euandra is a series of planets that's being destroyed slowly. And Mars was one as well. Perhaps Mars is Euandra. It's just a big play on how that planet seems destroyed and shit. How it doesn't have an atmosphere anymore. I'm like, well, something destroyed it, was what I was thinking. And I said, well, what if Mars is Euandra? I remember even debating on like drawing the map as according to how Mars looks and just filling it in. Like, what would it look like now? I debated on doing that and just making this a story about Mars's origins. I kind of went away from that idea because I thought it was corny. I was like, it's fucking corny, man. So I never went back to it. But at this point, man, early 2013, most likely, I was like, maybe it is. And then these keepers were the ones that saw it from all time. They were always combating this evil. Some sort of evil greed is destroying the world, and it's the keepers who are always fighting it. Is merely what that's kind of saying, and to keep it short. Here's that mention I said here. The keepers stay on until they fulfill their destiny, for they do not know their fulfillment. Yet they know when they have done it, as will go with all the keepers, and they guide the hero so that they disappear and fade into the universe. They're these ethereal beings. They're like angels. You see what I mean? Like, if I've been around since the beginning of this thing I'm fighting, whatever this thing is, I don't know. I think I gave it a name and I said it's the Forgotten King. He's the embodiment of this evil that they're fighting. And they've been at this for a long fucking time. They've seen it happen on many planets. They must be these ethereal beings. They must be like these angels. Hence why they can't be like man or May. It's impossible. They live differently. How that affects the modern lore, we'll get to it. But at this time, it's like they hold the knowledge and they will fight this evil. They cannot be killed fully. I guess somehow they are a material being, according to the way this reads, that can have their vessel destroyed. But in destroying that vessel, that must mean they don't necessarily, how do I word that? They never really were the vessel, they inhabited the vessel. Does that make sense? They're not necessarily a real thing, they just inhabit something real. Yeah, because right here it says, the keepers are spiritual beings sent to the plane of existence as guardians of all that is right. They know their fate and their purpose, though not their destiny. That is a mystery to them. Keepers know of a great plan, yet not its outcome. Their fate is to protect all, but their destiny is always moving. Could be as small as writing a book or as big as protecting a race of people. They're sentient beings. They're beings that are protectors. They're spiritual beings. Something is great about them and what they intend to do. And apparently it's connected to multiple planets, at least at this point in their lore. At least I was establishing that idea that they can't just be like, there's got to be more to it. It's not like planets here and the keepers fucking exist and they're magical beings. It's just what's interesting is, telling you this, the deep esoteric side of it, and going back to, this very low level, what are we trying to say here about the keepers? And knowing about them that they may have come from this other planet. They may have came from and seen the destruction of Mars. I'm not really sure how to still connect that. But to say that these beings, these higher beings who move around through our seemingly known universe, move from that planet, come to Earth, how does that Earth part reconnect to Yuandra, which exists outside of the known universe? I think the only way I could ever say that is I try to correct this idea, and that's why I said perhaps the people on Yuandra were once Earthlings. Something I explore with the Titans, to say that they were once this group of enigmatic humans who transcended beyond the known universe through their thought forms and shit. And these keepers seem to have gone the same route. But yet they were on the fringes of the universe and they were placed in the circle. They were, in a sense, the AOC. At least some of them were. And they were discovered by Dove. Was that because of the process in which they were transcending outside to Yuandra? Was this kind of a response? Because if we understand how it's written here so far, we could say, well, it was merely just a response. Yuandra was made outside the known universe, as we'll come to establish. Well, I already have in the Forgotten Actual series, episode 1 through 4. And I could say, when that was happening, these keepers, these protectors, moved through this process, and then eventually would come about Yuandra to protect the AOC. Even before that, they were protecting the AOC as much as they could, at least, before the Titans mucked everything up. Protect them inside of the circle as well. I mean, it's very difficult to kind of sit here and speculate on all this shit. What exactly all this means. It says the keepers long ago, even on another planet, a planet we may know, the keepers had once inhabited, for they have a long history going where they need to be. They once protected all on this planet, for life was just beginning, not in stages we are familiar with, yet the keepers saw them and guided them, helping them to come to potential. Though this did not last long, for the planet was destroyed. The Faith took who they could, the keepers of Faith, and placed them on a younger, nearer planet where they could flourish. So that's kind of the story that we're coming on with Dove and Aru and showing him what the Titans are doing. So the keepers needed to take these AOC, whatever those may be, and move them to a new planet. Well, that new planet's Yuandra. And now they have to, move them to this new place. It's to explore in that sense, like just to kind of pull them away. Again, protect these people. Protect these AOC. And they remained in what is now a destroyed temple of the Keeper Temple. That Keeper Temple, as far as I know, is, as of right now, exists in the astral realm as a place in which they hide. That crossroads point between the existence of the circle, which is attached to the universe, and what would be now the actual, like Yuandra, where that exists in. So they're sitting in this ruined place, but it's somehow described as a forgotten land. I just assumed it was a city, but I'm not really sure exactly what this is. Okay, so they managed to see what I mean. Like they're that's where that Mars thing comes up. Like, oh, Mars was destroyed, the keepers were there, and then it all happened. Maybe that's the forgotten lands. Maybe that's the destruction of the forgotten people, and now they have to move to a new area. In the modern day, I say that's the AOC in the realm of the city, and then they had to come to Yuandra. I just changed Mars. It could still be Mars. We just don't call it that because we don't know that word right now. It could also be very much dimensional. We say we moved out of the known universe, outside of that big bubble. But what if it's more of a process of dimensional? What if this Yuandra dimensionally exists kind of where Mars does in our dimension? And they could move through these dimensions. And so the process is still the same. They move these beings from this planet into the next. And the fringes that exist between Mars and the other planet, I drew it on the thing like it's a big bubble, and on the edge of the bubble is where the fringes is, where the circle was made. But what if that exists like a sheet of fabric, invisibly dividing Mars and our universe into the next one? So we could still say Mars is the place where the keepers came from, and that's where the AOC lived, the city, the place that was destroyed, but maybe it was dimensionally different. I'm on Mars in this planet, in this dimension, but in the next dimension, I'm standing in a totally different place. That's that Celtic understanding of the other world, a place that can exist in the shimmering of the water. It can exist between the shadow cast from the clouds when the sun. It can be seen as doorways through the caves. So in some sense, it is dimensionally, and it does exist in tandem with ours. And perhaps it still echoes the same truth that I once created. I'm not really sure what the fascination with Mars is, but I always found one. And this might be how we can explain it. It does work in tandem with what we're doing now. Because as I explained to you before, the AOC in the realm of the city, Sidhe. I'm not really sure how you say that in Irish, but I'm just going to say city. Well, that is the place in which the AOC live and dwelled, and the Titans discovered it and destroyed it because of their greed. And these AOC had to flee, and they fled to the next planet. And that's the story of the forgotten people in the previous episode. There was a beauteous feeling felt by all. It was, and it was love. That. And we talk about connecting that to the memory. Well, the memory is something that exists in the human mind, so it's the way we conceptualize our universe around us. If the memory knows how to access these other dimensions, and these keepers are the guardians of that, they move our perceptions. And that's why when I say we talk about how Yuandra exists in the imaginary, and how my mind finds this place to explore, well, we have to transcend into that through the imaginary. And in doing that, it allows the mind to go to the next dimensional understanding, where we can practice the skill of manifesting the unmanifested. It exists there, but it doesn't exist here. So that idea in the keepers and Mars, it all still works to this day. I just have to keep dwelling on this. I just have to keep finding out the truth of all this and dive deeper into what we're exploring even now. But let's return back to what he was saying. And in all of that, we definitely have something working. We have something happening here. We have keepers being protectors. Also, they guide through their destiny, and then they're going to help Eros on his journey. So clearly they're not from Yuandra. That's what we can draw from the first journal. They're not from Yuandra. They're these strange, ethereal beings that their bodies may not even be their own, that they can be taken from, and they're meant to guide people. They're meant to do something. Now, as I remembered previously, the keepers were destroyed. The keepers were taken away. Something happened. I think the Forgotten King was mentioned, but somehow the keepers are gone. But I remember thinking to myself, as Kevin was working on the Anakume, he would come to me and tell me of new Anaku clans that he was coming up with. He would tell me about what I've termed now the riddle of the eye, and like this process of going to the belly of the beast and coming out the other end, right? Jonah and the whale. And he was telling me about the stuff he was doing. And I said, if the keepers are gone and the forgotten people were destroyed, maybe a group of Anaku hold this knowledge. Maybe, because no one's alive anymore. The forgotten people were destroyed by the Forgotten King, and so were the keepers. And now there's only Anakume left, and I guess somehow mankind, I'm not there yet, but what if the keepers' knowledge was hidden in these libraries, but also they were given to somebody? And these people will become tied with the keepers ever since that point. This is probably mid-2013, later 2013. It says, long ago when the invaders came, the keepers gave the books of knowledge to the monks of the Fa Chu, to which they hid the books away until the right time. The book of our true history, hidden for the right time in the ancient library. Now, the keepers gave these Fa Chu Anaku their knowledge once again. And these Fa Chu hold on to this knowledge. These Fa Chu, in my mind, I think they're sympathetic to mankind. But they're a very enigmatic bunch. Like, you can't really get a grasp on who they are, what they want throughout the books. And even, I guess if I would even say to myself, I thought maybe they were bad, because the Fa Chu could possibly be connected to the Serpentine Order, which are the group of Anaku who seek to destroy mankind that hide up in the mountains. But I can't quite say. I do know there's a couple things that I will eventually approach when it comes to that. We have a Gun Fa Chu, who, I mean, his last name is Fa Chu because he was a Fa Chu member, abandoned the order because of something he didn't agree with, and he helped create the Serpentine Order. And he wrote a manifesto about how mankind should be destroyed. So I know that there's a weird connection there, but I don't think the Fa Chu were like, yeah, we kind of agree with that. I think he abandoned the order for a fucking reason. So the Fa Chu still probably, I don't know about look kindly on mankind, but have aided them. Much in the same way that the Anaku in the Ludin's forest in South Ansar aid a Quran. Like, it's the same thing. They're the same fucking kind of people. They're aiding the process of mankind, even though the Anaku around them would say they shouldn't. But I mean, the idea was planted, and it's still to this day, I'm not 100% sure on what that is. I just know that the keepers saw these Anaku, gave them the books of power, at least had them hide it, and trained a few Fa Chu. That's all I can really say to this point, definitively. But up until anything else besides that, it's iffy. Now let's return to the story that was quietly happening behind the scenes of what we're talking about. Okay, it's like 2013, 2014, somewhere in that era. Eris lives in this city called the Vol. The city falls under attack by unknown forces for unknown reasons. Eris is saved by a man named Cyphrus. Cyphrus leads him out of the city and says, I can't go with you further, but out in this, like, I think it was like a shack, like outside the city, there'll be this guy who will guide you. I have to fuck off. Cyphrus fucks off. Eris goes to this place, meets this warrior, Anaku, named Alistar, who's got to lead him to the forest. Not really sure what that is, why that's all happening, but this is just the story. He leads Eris up the mountains. In those mountains, he tells Eris, because Eris comes up to this giant ruin, and he says, you got to go in there. I can't follow you. And Eris is like, Jesus, I don't know if I want to do this. And he's unsure about it. But eventually he's like, okay, he reluctantly does it. And Alistair goes off and waits for him. He says, I'll be on the other side of this. Essentially, he establishes it's like a labyrinth. Eris goes inside and tries to explore this. He has no clue why he's going in here, what he's looking for. Is he just trying to get out to the other side? Or is he trying to find something? It's unclear to Eris because it was unclear to me. We bring Eris to this point where he had to walk away from everything he knows. He was guided by two different men. Well, the other one's not a man. He was guarded by possibly a keeper, but most likely a wizard. And then the wizard handed him off to a warrior. So we have the two sides there. We have of leadership from the kind of mystical side, the spiritual side, kind of like the Dagda. And then we have leadership from the warrior side. What is that, like Lu? Am I getting my mythology right? But he's got these two different types of leadership. Sorry, the Nuada. Forgive me. So that guides him to this temple, the highest point on the world. He's brought up here, enlightenment to the sun. Then he's placed before a labyrinth of the mind to which he has to find something. But what is it he needs to find? I have no idea. Eris has no idea. Alistair has no idea, and neither does Cypherus. But he goes into that place, and this is the beginning of the search for self. Through Eris. Let's get into what comes next. But let's keep in mind before the story begins that we are inside of the mind. We are inside of the self. Let's also keep in mind the forgotten people are the memories. Let's also keep in mind that the keepers are the protectors of those memories. The sages, the guides, the door holders. But also they are the ones who we reach through to allow us to come back to the memories. So So Eris comes into this place, discovers a mural wall, is confronted by a keeper dweller, which is a keeper that has died, but his spirit stays on to fulfills his destiny. This story is being told to him by a keeper. And the reason I'm going to tell you it now is because it establishes quite a bit about the keepers that's within the book. In fact, this same conversation, though it may be edited, will still be in the actual books. I wrote this a long time ago. So this was written around June of 2015. And this is Eris coming to face with a keeper dweller. He's within this labyrinth and he's looking upon a muraled wall, and then as he's looking, some sort of voice is speaking to him in this place. It says, when Eris set eyes upon the muraled wall in wonder, the haunting voice remarked, "Ah, yes, and there was might. Oh, yes. The might was evident, yet we did not, for that matter, understand. Doomed we were, though I'm sure seeing it that way was not in turn the downfall of Atria. Fools in the East we were called in a once time. Saviors of Euandria, yes, but damn fools in our approach. We did not know the folly of our stubborn nature. We thought we were all powerful. A folly of man, you see. After all, we are like you, man. Pride can be tricky. We may not come from here, but we fell into the dominion of man. The trappings of destiny changed. Still, we were seen as gods among men. Keepers we were called. Keepers would not tell you this, but you must understand what power can do." Eris looked at the next mural. The voice continued. "A last-ditch effort it was, though I do not understand why. We felt like we could hold the tyranny of evil, hold down the darkness. Yet it seems no matter how you combat the darkness, it will always find a new form, a new conduit, and it will rise again. Then what do we do? Yes, it is true what I say, but not all hope is gone. Though power is what they seek, you must not combat power with power. You will lose every time. People, Eris, want to see evil gone? Good. But we never learn to look at it until we are consumed by it. They don't know they have fallen from spirit or soul. You want to know how to change it all? Improve the quarrels in your own life. You see, you are part of a greater essence. You are within everyone, and they are you. Connection. We are all part of a working order, together. The blood of the planet, life force of the universe. So what affects you can in turn change others. At first it won't seem it, yet it works. And don't give up. You are the key. So seek out and change your wickedness. See the light. Face your fears. Obstacles past will lead you to higher ground. Yes, there is an optimism to see. We can do it together, though understand your path is not mine, nor mine yours. We all have a beautiful luxury to live subjectively. We all see the great illusion different. But when, and only when, we can get together to discuss our lives, we begin to see. The mass difference is beautiful, for empathy grows. Point of view is seen. Our difference is what makes the universe beautiful. We are the same, but we are different. Love grows from our great passion. Love is spawned from empathy. And when he came and forced a cut from God frequency upon the weak and suppressible human, he relished in it. But you must understand, he is fear. Now he was worshipped by who we now call our leaders. And though they push his grace as fear me, they really are the ones who live life as a fearful bunch. Yes, I talk of the ones who call themselves as our leaders. Remember, fear is afraid, so they never change. Cut off from God, they don't know how to find happiness, so they invent currency to have dominion over you. Then they feel powerful. Again, power is wicked. They control our lives so we can live as they do, afraid. Survival and everything negative inside of that emotion. If they could come back to the light and find the spirit from within, then they would see there is no need for that. They could be free, truly free. And then Eris finally asked, how can I be free? He's answered, you control yourself. You allow yourself to be free, and I cannot tell you how. That in turn was the downfall of man. When they heard our teachings, they said it was a hoax, for you cannot say how to be free. We could only do so much for them, but then they fell. If you can find spirit, you will be at one and pure connection with all. People will scoff and call you everything from snob to martyr, and even put you to death. But you will be what change the world needs, and you will be free. Is it hard? Asked Eris. Yes, it is. And if you do it, different will you always be. Changed by the loving force for the world to act upon. Your own path is yours. There are no consequences. You were meant to be here. This is the journey you must take, and it's of a human nature now. To have fear of this undertaking, but also to know your path. If seen through to the end, you will be rewarded with the greatest power, if you want to call it that, of all, and that is love. Eris cries, don't go, I need more. Only you can answer your questions. No one else will. Though listen and understand their point of views. Communication is easy by empathy. This is hard for the world right now. And you, Eris, well, you will change us all. I am blessed to have served you. He then ascended. At the end, he was happy. He had completed his path. As Eris navigated out of the labyrinth, noticing he was transcended to another realm for a time. Therefore he bypassed the mortal plague. He didn't get lost. He was right where he needed to be. For the most perished in the labyrinth of darkness took them. Do you notice that the keeper told him to find the spirits? spirits, just another word for the forgotten people, to find the memories of self. The memories that were placed inside of you from yourself and from the higher beings. He's telling him to have subjective thought, to find his own personal thoughts, his own belief system, his repressed memories. But not only that, he preached the idea of true self-belief. Not belief from another, belief for himself. That's the main thing that he echoes out of all of that. They made mistakes. We keepers did. We thought we could suppress this. We thought we could hold the tyranny at bay of the whisper, of the darkness of evil. But then we realized that we are like men. And I think in some sense it's slowly telling you, which is why the keepers were seen as evil by mankind after quite a while of being their mentors, is they worshiped the whisper, but in reality they accepted the whisper. Because they accepted the fact that the darkness, evil, whatever you want to call it, sadness, fear, is something the world needs just as much as it needs love. The forgotten people were born with love, and they were met by fear. And it was the keepers who fought that. But eventually they realized that fear was the greatest thing that could help that love grow. So when Eris is presented with this, he's told that, and he's also told to find self. Now, can you see this destiny from these keepers? This was born in a time where these keepers were the ones who must have come to this realm that Man and Anaku lived on and felt that they could save them. If they felt that they could save them, that means there was something to be saved from. And as it was described here, the word darkness and the word fear are the biggest things used. Forgotten King isn't even mentioned in this. They're mentioning some sort of ethereal thing. Now, we're going to come to that ethereal thing in future videos because this being has always been known as the Whisper. It is the embodiment of fear manifest into a being. And that is what this keeper is talking about. But it's around 2015, man. We're like 3 years into the book. And I'm already starting to establish the idea of there's a living world here, but there's some strange outside thing affecting people in it. And it could be the very thing that has tricked the Forgotten King in some way, shape, or form. Accept fear in your life as much as you accept love. Because within that, there's a balance. To truly unravel the lost memories that hide inside of you, the lost parts of yourself, fragmented like the Forgotten King, find those pieces, puzzle them together, but make sure you realize to look at the negative as much as you do the positive. I mean, it's simple enough to say you can find the pattern of your life, but it's also more complex in saying to truly understand what darkness, which is fear, the whisper, what that truly does bring. I mean, it'll come in time where the whisper is looked at as the most evil fucking thing in the entire universe. It's a malevolent, wicked being attaching itself to people like a virus and spreading itself, which is fear to all. But maybe looking at it differently like the keepers started to do after they were defeated and in hiding. Maybe that's how we can truly protect the forgotten people. But it's these keepers, as he mentioned here, though we're not of man, we're like man. So I kept thinking about that. You're not man, but you're like man. You might not have come from this planet. You might be from another planet. You've been fighting this strange evil for a long time. What does that mean? What can I do with that? Dimensions, other worlds, places in which our other thoughts may lie. What can I understand about these keepers? beings sent to us to show us the truth that hides in our own mind, to give us the puzzle, and to let us walk through the labyrinth of our own mind. So let's dwell on that a little bit more. The keepers, discipline, guardians, an ancient race living on what is now the Forgotten Lands. They were not always keepers, but average people. Peasants, farmers, lords, bankers, gurus, teachers, etc. They worship the Creator, and they worship the Creator of faith. They were the protectors. Only then were the keepers but guardians, but they were destroyed. Yet they carry on in spirit. Through the keepers are men of faith. We are not warriors, quote. We vow to the faith we would sacrifice to watch over Yuandra in the dark times, unquote. They would send a savior to shift this consciousness. This being was the guardian. But when we, here's another quote, but when we agree to watch over, we also agree to our fulfillment, to fade into the universe when we complete our destiny. For every destiny is different, small to big. For our powers could not be given to mortal men with mortal purpose. This is how I see it in my head. That the keepers, maybe they inhabit a body. Maybe they're in this other realm, and in that other realm they were normal people. But maybe they inhabit something. And that's when I found this here. The appearance of the love and fear spirits throughout time. Just like in real life, when faced with a choice, we have two opportunities. They appear and commune with the one in the dilemma. One does not know how, or may even notice their presence, yet almost in the back of their mind they know. But only the sensitive are aware of this. And we've talked about the sensitive before. It does not dictate their lives, but they become aware of them. All sensitive can fall from love and into fear. It is not an easy to stay, for many have fear in them. Two of these halves make a whole. One cannot exist without the other. So there needs to be these two understandings to complete each other. The people who try to live their lives in this understanding were sensitives. They tried to transcend above what existence was told to be. They lived in peace and seclusion. Yet they were stamped out, cast away. Their secrets were hidden with them, for they discovered the real truths of the world. Did you think they were destroyed merely by angry peasants? No. They were discovered and then vanished from Yuandra, and nobody knows how. Perhaps they transcended from the realm. Now aid is given to the keepers from the other realm. And this is what the Forgotten King wants. Sensitive and keepers. I made mention of that thing that happened with Quinn, where the keepers, these, at that point, corrupted keepers, were using these sensitives to snuff out God, to find this temple so that they may enter it for whatever purpose they had. These keepers are guiding from another realm, yet these dark ones are here. So I think, in my mind, I said, perhaps keepers are spirits, love spirits. Fear spirits are what the Whisper's agents become. These ones are of love. Maybe from this point, we can establish that the keepers, this makes it work perfectly. They guide from another realm. That is where they come from. They are like man because they can enter man. They are, so the Whisper is the embodiment of fear that spreads throughout society. Well, they're embodiment of love. And it's these love, fear spirits that are the division of the AOC, the division of the otherworldly beings. One became this and one became that. It ties back into the idea that the AOC born in Yuandra were born of love, but they were presented with fear, And these are the two different types, you could say, of AOC that guide from afar. And perhaps the keepers, though leaning more towards love, are within the middle. These beings, these enlightened beings that come from this other place, seek to guide Eris, and they can be destroyed in this world. But when they're destroyed, only their body is destroyed. They still linger on becoming keeper dwellers. Meaning, they are spirits. Spirits, yes, but also the ones that protect the memories. The memories are the forgotten people, and we found out there's a division between love and fear of those forgotten people. Some became twisted and fallen, we could say, while others remain the light. And the keepers are the ones that guard this, because they're the idea, like Eris had to go into that temple, that labyrinth, and he had to go into the mind, and he had to come face to face with the guardian of the memory. Well, sometimes the memory guarding it is saying, hey, this is not a good one. This is a bad memory, as opposed to, well, this is a very good one. But you have to unravel all of them. And as we've been saying constantly, the keepers are the protectors. They're the door holders of this establishment of holding on to memory and unraveling it. So it all is fitting together, as you can see. It's taken so long to get to this point. There are states that we can access in ourselves. In accessing these states, we can become keepers. Always will they be lingering through the story forever and evermore. It says, keepers of faith, from the love and devotion that was given to the forgotten people, a group of them rose and created a religion, though there was not much love for the rest of Yuandra's people. So these beings were created alongside the forgotten people in the realm of the city, the AOC. They were just regular people. And they were the guiding force to help the forgotten people. But something happened to the forgotten people. And that something happening was the Titans, who destroyed their world. So the forgotten people were sent into Yuandra to live alongside them. And the keepers saw to restoring Yuandra, because it was ruled over by all these lowly Anaku. They were fighting each other. It was animalistic, and they sought to bring balance here. So when the keepers entered this place, they sought about creating great change, but it rubbed the Anaku the wrong way. And eventually, when the Titans and all that shit happened, that's the problem that the keepers will be facing. And eventually they will be wiped out. But that's on Yuandra. Somehow these keepers, these scholars, these monks, they're willing to help. They're willing to do whatever they can to aid from this other realm, though the realm in which they exist is destroyed. So many years later, I had to establish, like, well, the realm was fucking destroyed, that they had to have hidden somewhere. They're just in hiding. That's what's going on. There are some dwellers that are left on the world that can guide, but they're like emotionless. They're like they're spirits, but they don't have cognizance. Where they're just like, I'm going to think that I should do this and that. Like, no, they're just floating around like a ghost in a room waiting to be released. Their destiny is still awaiting in that room. And I said, these keepers who will become crucial going forward will be centered around the entire plot of everything. And I always knew that they would be centered around mankind. But how can I make this work? These keepers, how can I make this all work? This is all great, but laying it all down now, what do I do with that? Here I am sitting here now knowing what I know about the books. Where do the keepers lie? The keepers, remember how it said the love, fear spirits? How they're kind of connected. You have to have one to understand the other. You have to have love to understand fear. Well, it just so happens Yuandra is born. Everything goes along as it does. That will happen in the Forgotten series. The planet becomes whole. Mankind lives. We have all this stuff happening, which you'll find in time. And the kingdom of Adrana is established. but they have been infiltrated by an evil group called the Asuk, who are replacing the Keepers. The Keepers, these AOC, these beings that are not human but live alongside human, who guide them as Jedi, are being quietly replaced by replicants. They're being quietly replaced by shapeshifters. These shapeshifters work for an evil god. But now, these Keepers can bestow knowledge on man, but man has to allow some sort of spirit within him. And that's kind of these group of humans are called Keepers. This is how humans can become corrupted Keepers. So, in saying all that, with the Keepers, we have established this. So the Keepers end up following, because, okay, how do I word this? Because they are love and fear and they have to be together to understand another. Mankind was tricked and they were told fear is the whisper and it's evil and we have to stamp it out. And these Keepers that you were following, your Jedi, are worshiping the darkness and evil. They're not at one with it. They're worshiping it. They're bad. And so the Keeper Wars began in mankind and the Keepers were destroyed. This is how I was able to take that old idea, like, oh, the Keepers were destroyed and lost. I just brought it to the modern era and the Keepers were stamped out. But there were few that went into hiding. While many were killed and, their specters remained, there was a group of them who went into hiding beyond the astral realm, in a place the Titans, stuck in the astral realm, would not find them, nor the Forgotten King, because he's gone mad in the realm of creation. They can't even get his attention. And from there, they guide and protect the prophecy. These Keepers are the ones in which weave the dreams of the mortals. Saying everything we've said about them, establishing all we have, though they may be the guardian of the fear and love spirits, or because it's like, are they the guardians of that, or are they the love and then the fear is the darkness? It's up to you to decide that. But I believe as they guard that, they're the ones that weave the dreams because they're communing to you and giving you a choice. And that is how they guide from the astral realm, the realm of the dreaming, the realm of where we could say our astral bodies live. And this is how they guide, not as warriors, but as monks. They can't directly enter this world anymore, but they can do one thing, and that is inhabit. This is very convoluted, I know. But the Keepers were once forgotten people that entered the realm of Yuandra and lived alongside man. Some of them taught mankind and gave them special powers. Others gave Anaku special powers and stuff. That's that book of knowledge of the Fachu. They left them that during the Keeper Wars, okay? The ones that they taught mankind were humans that had a Keeper understanding. That was just like you allowed a spirit to enter you. And that spirit can use your body, though you work in tandem with this spirit. That's what mankind can do. The true Keepers are the forgotten people. Those forgotten Keepers they vanished a long time ago. All that's left are human Keepers and possibly Anaku Keepers who become the Fachu. That we'll get into at a later time. The human ones are prone to corruption, hence why we see them doing bad things. But when these beings were tricked by this evil god, these Keepers had to go into hiding. So we have human Keepers with a spirit of another inside of them, hiding in the astral realm. From that point, they can only guide from that place spiritually. So the spirit that is inside this Keeper is able to transcend down, descend, we could say, to guide mankind that way. Though they come across as the spirit of love or the spirit of fear. And that is what is the presiding factor that will continue to happen. So when you read the books and Eris is making mention of this shit, that's what we kind of have to keep in mind. These keepers are a very, very complex group of people. So all that we went through, all of that to try to unravel what the keepers are, I'm going to leave you with this last thing I wrote here. This is something I wrote not very long ago, keeping all this in mind. And maybe it will either complicate it or put a lid on it. We'll find out. It says the spirits and the keepers. How they can access from their hiding place beyond the astral realm. This process began with the understanding of the love-fear spirits. When one has accepted such a reality, only do they become an open vessel for the, quote, projected keeper. For this is on the other side the keeper awaits to transcend and project his body through the astral and into the conduit. The conduit, being open and willing, will then accept this spirit and live further through the code. Though this process is not foolproof, the accepted keepers can in time become corrupted. And this is the human keepers we're speaking of. And there that the keepers could indeed fall from the path. But before we discuss the fill, as we call it, we should seek to understand the spirit. The spirit is not the consciousness or soul of the AOC from beyond the astral realm. This spirit is what we could understand as the manifested emotion that lay fragmented from Oapek himself. That, or possibly other aeon. It is unsure as to what these spirits truly are. Some have even believed these spirits are the fragmented, forgotten people lost to time. Regardless, this possession of the initiate is the process of allowing such a force inside themselves. This practice was eventually frowned upon, for it was seen as working with the whisper, some esoteric practices from a bygone era among mankind. And in fact, after the Keeper Wars and establishment of the new Asik order, all spirit worship or practice became outlawed. For most ancient corrupted keepers were then killed, banished to the Murphos, or vanished altogether. That is the official statement of how it seems now. But the thing I want to leave you with is, as we know with the keepers by this point, that they guard the memory, and that they are the guiding tools that allow you to go to self. It's interesting that to accept one of these keepers into yourself, they must manifest some sort of emotion through you. And the idea that it might be a fragmented, forgotten person can help you understand that which hides within. That which hides within is a transcendence and a process which allows you to understand that which exists around you that you could not see before. These keepers that guide mankind from afar, at least the AOC, and when they create the keepers of mankind, who did become corrupted themselves or go into hiding, this process becomes crucial for Eris in the books to unravel, something that he will come face to face with when he is presented with the dilemma of the love and fear spirits.